Hello. Today I will examine the discursive power of the copyright infringement lawsuit over photographs' meaning. As a case study, I focus on Tony Gentile's iconic photograph of the Italian judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, which was the subject of the Rome Court of First Instance's judgment. I will first examine the journey of the photograph from a snapshot to a contemporary icon in Italy. Following, I will analyze how the image became a polysemous sign. Once I establish how the image came to be what it is, I will examine the copyright infringement case, which introduced the notions of authorship and creativity as central to the image that has otherwise been known for its symbolic value. The photograph of Falcone and Borsellino was taken on March 27, 1992, at a conference regarding the mafia and politics, where the two anti-mafia judges were among the speakers. Tony Gentile, commissioned by the newspaper of Giornale di Sicilia, took a sequence of images depicting the brief encounter of the two judges. Initially, the editor-in-chief of the newspaper decided not to use the photos, but told Gentile to archive them, to be used in the future. Same year, in May 23rd, Giovanni Falcone, his wife Judge Francesca Morvillo, and three escorting police officers were killed in a mafia attack in Capaci, Sicily. Following the attack, which came to be called the Capaci Massacre, Gentile shared the image with his photography agency, who then distributed the photo to the news and media agencies in Italy and abroad. Within 2 months after the Capaci Massacre, the judge Paolo Borsellino and 5 police officers escorting him were killed in a subsequent mafia attack, Via D'Amelio bombing, on July 19th. At this point, many newspapers and media agencies already had the image on their archives. On 20 July 1992, the photo was circulated in the media for the first time. Tony Gentile says, in this initial publication, the image was widely distributed in newspapers and television. Hence, the image became something immediately familiar to the Italian public within a day. From the 1992 summer onwards, the image was appropriated by the anti-mafia protests. In this image from the demonstrations in Palermo, the photo is accompanied by a caption that reads, quote-unquote, so that their smile may live forever. In the first anniversary of the Capaci Massacre, the image was reproduced onto sheets by an anti-mafia movement, with the slogan that reads, quote-unquote, you have not killed them, their ideas are walking on our legs. The sheet is also visible on the Falcone tree, a tree outside the house of Giovanni Falcone that became a grassroots memorial for the people of Palermo after the Capaci Massacre. Just like the appropriation of the image by anti-mafia protesters, Gentile's image has been adopted into various forms of commemoration by the Italian state, regional authorities, and people of Italy. In the 10th anniversary of the massacres, a bronze medallion that depicts the judges from Gentile's photo was placed on a wall in the Palermo airport. The Italian state, in the 10th and 20th anniversaries of the massacres, printed stamps that features drawing renditions of Gentile's photo. Likewise, mural adaptations of the photo have been installed to higher education institutions and the outer facade of courthouses. One can see the photo reproduced in streets, plates, street arts, as statues, and in various other forms. Thus, the photo has transformed from a snapshot to a contemporary icon, capable of self-referencing. And as any cultural icon, its message and use have also been contested in satirical works, as well as documentaries, of which I will not provide a detailed examination here. But by now, it should be clear that this is not quote-unquote a simple photograph, but a visual sign that is multi-layered in its connotations. Now, I turn how the image became a contemporary icon and a part of the collective memory in Italy. I argue that it is due to 3 interrelated aspects. First is the specifics of its content, second is the specifics of the photographic medium, and the third is the multiple contexts of use. The power of Falcone and Borsellino photograph, Eleanor Chiari states, comes from the significant absence of the violence. Most Italians learned the news of association through the television reportage, which showed the distracted roads and cars in the aftermath of the attacks. Gentilla's photograph, on the other hand, concentrated the collective gaze of traumatized viewers on the serenity of the two judges' smiles. Chiari further argues that the image is the visual opposite of the mechanized and faceless violence of the mafia attacks, as it shows a genuine moment of joy between the judges. This is why it is capable of triggering strong emotions. As Victor Bergin reminds us, quote unquote, there is no content without a form, and no form which does not shape a content. The image's success in transmitting such strong emotions owed to the specifics of the photographic medium on three aspects. The first aspect is that it is a still image. In examining the images of Vietnam War, Patrick Hagopian argues that the shared memory concentrates on the still image instead of the moving images. Quote unquote, the still image exists in space but not in time. It can endure for the viewer. We can possess it as we stare at it. The still image is also easier in its distribution and becomes recognizable in a faster fashion, which, according to Cornelia Brink, is an important aspect of the iconic status. The second aspect is that it is a snapshot. According to Victor Bergin, quote unquote, the photographic snap has an authority which other forms of picture making lack. It presents itself as factual evidence of an actual state of affairs. The lack of planning and capturing the momentarily available scene reassures the sincerity of the moment between Falcone and Borsellino. This is also relevant to the third aspect of the form, which is the indexicality. The analog photo has been argued to be an evidence of its object's existence, given that the camera and the object had to be at the same physical space in the same time. According to Roland Barthes, this reassurance of reality is what allows the viewers to engage with the image on a personal level and sympathize with the subjects in the still image. John Walker argues that, quote unquote, different parts or characteristics of the image appear important in different display contexts. In its initial appropriation by the anti-mafia demonstrations, the image was accompanied by the caption of, so that their smile may live forever, signifying the serene facial expressions of the judges against a violent act of horror. In the first anniversary of the Kapasi massacre, the caption was, "You have not killed them, their ideas are walking on our legs," which points somewhere beyond the depicted content of the image. The users like the latter transformed the image into something more than the depicted content and turned it into a symbol. Not only the display context, but the wide circulation of the image and the multiplicity of the contexts in which the image was presented turned the Falcone and Borsellino photograph into a multi-layered visual sign. Through the combination of its content, form, and context, the image of Falcone and Borsellino became an icon that signifies without a caption. By now, the image is itself a reference rather than something that points to a reference. In my examination so far, the photographer Tony Gentile was at the margins, never taking a central role. In a 2012 interview, Gentile stated, quote unquote, "From an emotional point of view, I think the photo's content is so clear that it speaks for itself, and I contributed nothing. The photographer's positioning as strange to the content is of importance for the sincerity of the image. The image's emotional capacity, as I explained, relies on the reassurance of the genuineness of the moment. As such, the photographer's touch does not shift away the viewer's attention. Contrarily, in the judgment of the Rome Court of First Instance, we are invited to look at the image solely to see whether there is a sufficient authorial imprint to raise copyright protection. This new context is in a striking contrast with the social construction of the image's meaning. And I argue the shift in attention is an inevitable impact of the copyright lawsuit's discursive power. Rosalind Krauss argues that the meaning of photographs change as they move through cultural domains. The discursively different spaces treat the image in diverse ways. A landscape photograph, Krauss examines, could be treated as an artwork in the discursive space of a museum and as a scientific document in a scientific journal. The content remains the same, yet the shift in the image channel of transmission, the expectations of its audience, and the intention of the presenter creates a distinct message. So far, we saw the iconic image in various discursive spaces, such as protest, journalism, and politics, where the image was surrounded by commemoration, slogans, and political messages. In the discursive space of copyright law, the image is accompanied by the notion of ownership, authorship, and creativity. The image entered into the novel discursive space of copyright after Tony Gentile sued RAI, the Italian national broadcasting, for multiple unauthorized uses. Gentile sought compensation for material and non-material damages. The Italian Copyright Act provides a dual protection for photography. Under Article 2, the works of photographic art enjoys the full copyright protection. And under articles from 87 to 92, simple photographs are protected by a related right with a duration of 20 years after their production. For a photograph to enjoy the full protection, it should demonstrate a particular creativity of its author. In the process of adjudication, the image goes through a double contextual shift. The first is during the adjudication, in which the judge is the point of reception of the image. The second is when the judgment is published, where the judge becomes the source of emission and the judgment is the new channel of transmission for the image. It is a curious position for the judge to decide whether a photograph is a work of art or a simple photograph. In previous case law, the Italian courts examined the compositional features of the photographs, such as the perspective, framing, shadowing, and lighting. One point of reflection is clearly the issue of aesthetic neutrality, but it's not my focus in this study. Rather, I am interested in the judge's position as a spectator and a critic that has to come up with a conclusive decision on the image status as a work of art. Unlike an ordinary spectator who engages with the image primarily on a personal level, the judge's interpretation of the image has to be presented on a social level. Thus, their examination takes an inevitable shift to the composition of the work and the author's mannerism in this process. Through the judgment, one can observe two distinct aesthetic theories at play, that of intentionalism and formalism. Stating that the value of Gentile's work lies in what it symbolizes, the judge argued Gentile could not have been intended to achieve the symbolic outcome. Relying on the author's intention to make art as a criterion, the judge stated that Tony Gentile did not have in mind the creative goal of artistic and innovative value. Later, the judge makes an analogy between the mediums of photography and painting, and states that the photograph must be an expression of an artistic project. The judge further elaborates the artistic expression criteria, which is a mix of intentionalism and formalism. A long, careful choice of compositional elements to capture an unrepeatable shot that reflects the author's vision. The painting analogy has long been debated within the photography discourse. I don't plan to repeat the debate here. And the latter statement regarding what makes a photograph a work of art has received criticism from Italian photographers and copyright scholars alike. However, I do not want to shift the attention towards the debatable statements regarding the photograph's artistic status. Rather, what I highlight here is that the judge's treatment to the image is an outcome of copyright's discursive power that simultaneously locates the judge as a spectator and a critic of the visual work, and prioritizes a specific notion of authorship isolated from the image's social context. This peculiar position is the first aspect of the discursive power of the copyright lawsuit over the image. Its second aspect is the judgment, where the judge moves from the position of the spectator to the source of emission of the image in this new channel of transmission. The engagement with the image in this particular context operates through the paradigms of copyright, and the reader of the text is invited to consider primarily the authorship of the image through its composition. As I have already examined the most important aspects of the judgment, I will not repeat myself here. However, I should add that now we are presented with a legal text that surrounds the Falcone and Borsellino photograph with the notions of creativity, authorship, and the aesthetics of its composition. If we were to examine the copyright dispute from the social context of the image, the more fitting contextualization of the dispute would regard the socio-economic factors that shape the circulation of the image. And while the judgment inevitably shapes the context of circulation for the image, it only does so behind the mask of the examination of authorship.